Truth be told, I'm not the administrator of my social sites, but I back the administrator. See, what happens, folks, is sometimes we get into these little discussions and debates, and the word goes out, flood the Facebook site, or whatever, through bloggers, through people who think that by this kind of mob mentality they're going to persuade people. They don't persuade anybody of anything. They annoy people. And so the administrator has to clean out a bunch of them, particularly when they get into their hate modes and keep linking back to other sites which are intending to increase the hits on those other sites. And so we get into these debates on constitutional issues, on economics, on history, and that's a good thing. But the Ron Paul people are the biggest a-holes of them all. Now, some of you may be thinking about Ron Paul. I promise you, his followers are the biggest a-holes of them all. Not necessarily because what they believe, but the way they express themselves. They're obnoxious. They're like Marxists. Really. The mob mentality, the language, true believers. And yet there's a lot that is sensible, particularly on the Rand Paul side of the family, when it comes to the Constitution and economics and so forth. But when it comes to actually defending this nation, the effort to twist the Constitution so the Congress is some kind of parliamentary body, and to pull a quote from this founder or that one and try and make your case, it's almost childish, goofy. And then you get in the weeds and you got to pull back. Look at the big picture. These are outliers. A lot of the people who follow him are truthers, conspiracy theorists behind 9/11. A lot of them are Israel and Jew haters. Not all of them, obviously. I'm not saying that. But you should see the stuff we had to pull off our sites. So I'm told. Again, I don't want to accuse everyone of that. That would be ridiculous. But then we get people who have access to their own websites or other websites and put together little YouTubes and videos like something called the Southern Avenger. Thinking to myself, what is it, some kind of Jefferson Davis acolyte? What is that? And they talk of secession and all these other things, which is fine. We can talk to her blue in the face. And then they pretend to represent the Tea Party. The Southern Avenger, Professor Erwin Corey, whoever they are. I didn't see them at any rallies. Maybe they were in the background somewhere, but they're not organizing. They're not resonating with the American people. They're outliers. So be very careful about some of these folks. I know I am. Which is why the mob swings in action, all 14 of them. Now, I'm going to tell you something. Here's the bottom line with this Libya business. The president is going to speak today in about an hour and 20 minutes, and we're going to carry it live. And I hope he doesn't go on and on and on and on, because it shouldn't require an hour to explain your position on Libya now that we are, in fact, involved in military action, and presumably we have some kind of a plan. But if Obama's basic argument is that everyone has universal rights and it is the job of the United States of America to enforce them, then I'm going to tell you something. That's an excuse. If you look at the African continent, particularly the Sudan, there has been mass rape and torture and murder in the Sudan by the Muslims against the black Christians. That's been going on, it seems like, forever. Nothing close anywhere else on that continent. And the Congo, too. So when they say we had to step in to stop bloodshed in Libya based on the notion of universal rights, surely that can't be true. Simply can't be true. Because on that basis, on that principle, that doctrine, we should be in the Sudan right now, or working to get a coalition together. But we're not in the Sudan. So that tells me this is nothing but a pretext. A pretext to what? I heard Rush today say that it's basically a battle to help Europe over oil. That makes a lot of sense to me. But I think it's actually a little more than that. And I explained my theory last week. Obama wants to change fundamentally the way this nation conducts its foreign policy and its national security. He wants to internationalize it through the United Nations, through NATO, through existing international organizations. In other words, He believes he is the global citizen. He believes he is this global leader. And what he wants to do is, in so many ways, damage American sovereignty. Just listen to his propaganda in other contexts about how we use too much of the world's resources given our population, about spreading the wealth. Well, this spreading the wealth thing is an offset of Marxism, and it knows no boundaries. That is, it respects no nation-state boundaries. I honestly believe the reason he had the head genocidal dictator of China at that state dinner, and he doesn't have many state dinners, is because he kind of likes that society. Didn't he say as much? About, and I paraphrase, wishing that, in China you can get these things done, but here you really can't. Yeah, we have this checks and balance thing. Yeah, this Montesquieu principle of checks and balances and divided power, which annoys the hell out of him, which is why he rules by dictate so often. Now, here's the thing. If what he says in an hour and 15 minutes, assuming his own time, is more the same claptrap, largely incoherent, building an argument around actions that have already been taken, that is, if it's really unpersuasive, and honestly, I don't know what the argument can possibly be, because I find it utterly unpersuasive, every one of the arguments they've tried, then I think it's time for Congress to act. We have this debate over whether they have to declare war as a requisite to this kind of military operation, which I think is absurd. But Congress has power, real, honest to goodness, constitutional, enumerated authority, without ambiguity, without having to rely on one or two or three quotes from a particular founder or three founders. It's right there in the Constitution. And during the Constitutional Convention and the ratifying debates, it couldn't be clear. Congress controls the purse strings. And it's not just for appropriating, it's for defunding. Now, this continuing resolution ends in a week or two. Will the House or the Senate put a rider on a funding bill, an appropriations bill, to prevent any further monies being used to prosecute military operations in Libya? Well, I haven't heard that anybody's going to actually advance that case, other than a few of the, as I call them, outliers and backbenchers. But what about Harry Reid? What about Chuck Schumer? What about Boehner and Cantor? They're not even talking about it. And they've, in my view, no intention of doing it. So we can bang the pots and pans all we want about a president initiating non-defensive military operations, whether through NATO or not, and demanding he has got to seek a declaration of war. But he's not. Even if that were the case, he has not. Nor have most presidents in well over 100 military operations. But Congress isn't impotent. Congress can do something about it. So why won't it? If the belief is that the president, this president, is usurping congressional authority, if it's as clear as the advocates say, then why don't they do it? From my point of view, the policy is mind-numbingly incoherent. I cannot tell you today, and we've struggled with this for over a week, exactly why we are firing missiles into Libya, if our goal isn't to kill that man for killing American citizens. I can't tell you. And I can't tell you why, when this first occurred, I didn't understand why, if the position is universal rights, why we're there and not in Syria. And if we're not in Syria, why we're not in Iran. And if we're not in Iran, why just the Middle East? What about other areas? Cuba? So Obama is not leading a foreign policy based on the doctrine of advancing universal rights. He simply is not. I think his doctrine is one of surrendering American sovereignty to the United Nations and to other international authorities, which is bad enough. And if I'm right, and if whatever he says tonight is unsatisfactory, then for those reasons alone, these military operations should cease, because then he is utterly irresponsible and he needs to be held to account. We'll be right back. There's a lot going on in this country. Things that I never thought I'd be witnessing, frankly, even though I thought it was getting bad. I have been using the phrase criminal front group to describe this group, Media Matters, now for many, many years. I have explained in great detail what a 501c3 non-profit, non-partisan charitable organization is under the Internal Revenue Code, because I study these things, as does my legal group. I've also used the phrase tortious business interference for anybody who seeks, including them, to interfere with my program. And so these words are getting around now, apparently, and these arguments are getting around now, apparently. When you talk about Media Matters, do as I do and have done for years. Refer to it as the criminal front group, Media Matters. And the reason I call it a criminal front group is because it is taking contributions from individuals. Those individuals can deduct them from their own income taxes. Media Matters, being a nonprofit charitable organization, does not pay any taxes on it. And yet it basically is a laundering operation that uses tax-exempt money, which people deduct their contributions on their own income taxes from, to amass a huge amount of money, about $10 million a year, in order to undertake what are clearly political operations. And I've been calling on the Internal Revenue Service to audit and investigate the criminal front group Media Matters now for several years. And there's an absolutely rock-solid basis to do it. And if they do it, and I believe one day they may well, they need to make sure they get hold of all emails, all hard drives, all hard paper document communications, and telephone logs, because I believe what they will find is a shadowy coordination effort between this organization and among these organizations. This one is the hub, and Democrat operatives, Democrat public officials, and other Democrat organizations. Time has long passed for the Internal Revenue Service to do its job. We'll be right back.